Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here for the Week 13 lineup show at SportsEthos. You guys can find this on YouTube, and you're already here on YouTube, so hit the like and subscribe buttons. You guys help more people see the show. My name is Joe Orrico. I am your co-host here, along with my friend Steve Vidovich. You guys can find us on Twitter at Steven Vidovich with a PH and at Joe Orrico 99. We're going to be here answering your questions for the next half an hour or so. Apologies for a little bit of a delay getting started. Steve, how you doing, my friend?
I'm staying dry. I'm out here in California. We got a little bit of wet weather that's been coming our way, so it's been a little crazy. But luckily, I've been able to stay dry. The house is dry, so excited to talk some fantasy hoops and get away from the wet weather for a bit.
It's not exactly normal for you guys to have a bunch of rain, is it?
Not in the last few years. I think the last time it was wet was 2019. And I think we're still in a drought, no matter how much it'll rain. California, West Coast is still in a massive drought. So we'll need more winters like this. Hopefully the rain can stop for a little bit so that the ground can soak up some of the water. But excited to talk another week of fantasy hoops. I hope you guys are doing well in your leagues and that we've been giving out some good advice.
I personally, this has been, and I probably shouldn't even say, great sales job off the top here. Might be my worst year of fantasy that I've ever had for basketball. My drafts were, looking back on it, I made a bunch of mistakes. This is a disaster, honestly. Hoping we can help you guys out going forward here, because it's not always the way it works. Your team, the best people in the industry don't always have the best teams. Not to say that I'm the best, we're the best people in the industry, but hopefully we can steer you guys a little bit better than I've steered myself over these last few weeks. Steve, you did the show solo last week because we got off a little bit earlier than usual. The game started, I forget when. They were starting in the morning, I think, on the West Coast for you guys. So thank you for taking us solo last week. You prepared some notes like you typically do, schedule-based notes. Who has some advantages and disadvantages this week, or are there really any to speak of based on the schedule?
So we got a really interesting schedule this week. I think fantasy managers are going to really enjoy this week. We got no day of the week with fewer than 6 games. So we got Monday, actually tonight, and Thursday are 6-game nights. And the highest volume day is actually Friday with 9 games. So that means every single day this week is going to have somewhere between 6 and 9 games. That'll allow for a lot of balanced lineups and no low volume days to target. So perhaps it's a slight disadvantage for us, like really avid GMs who can prepare well in advance. We don't have those days to target. We do have 16 teams on a 3-game week. We got 13 teams on a 4-game week. And then we have 1 team, unfortunately, on a 2-game week, and that's going to be the Brooklyn Nets, who I'm sure will be a big topic of conversation today. I see a question in the chat from Adrian about Kyrie Irving, and we'll get to that in a bit. But the Nets are on a 2-game week this week, so definitely going to be in weekly lineup settings. You're going to want to stay away from the fringe guys on the Nets versus some of the 4-game weeks. I did look at which teams didn't have back-to-backs of the 4-game weeks. And obviously the teams that don't have back-to-backs are playing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. And those 4 teams are going to be the Chicago Bulls, the Denver Nuggets, the Sacramento Kings, and the San Antonio Spurs. So I would say that all 4 of those teams have your best schedules because you have no low volume days. So that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday schedule is looking better than almost any week this season because of the balanced schedule. So if I was going to stream any players this week, I would be targeting somebody on one of those 4 teams.
Yeah, you mentioned we're going to be talking a bit about Brooklyn today, and I mean maybe we'll hold off on that for just a second, actually, because there's a couple of things we want to talk about. This is probably, and without looking at the rest of the weeks for the entire regular season, maybe the best week that we have in terms of balance. I hate when there's 13 games and then 2 games and then 12 games and then 4. It's a headache enough as it is, keeping up to date with injuries and game time decisions and everything else. When you don't have to worry about that, when you have to worry about that, it's just a whole added other element. This week, you guys can take it easy a little bit in terms of that. Now, I did want to ask you, and we talked about this for a second off the air, Jonathan Isaac, and this is totally out of left field if you guys are listening for the first time and you guys are probably thinking, what the hell are you guys talking about? We try and touch on Jonathan Isaac here, just, for a few minutes just to see if there's been any updates on him, because I find the whole thing to be, I mean, it's someone's health. It's not funny, but it is kind of turned into a joke at this point. He hasn't played in, I think, 2.5 years. Any news on Jonathan Isaac? Should we have any hope that we'll ever see him wear a jersey again? Is he going to retire? What have you heard about him? What do you think about him?
Honestly, I think it probably is in the Magic's best interest if he doesn't play a game, because I believe they can void the last year of his contract just entirely because of the missed games that he's had so far. I might be incorrect on that, but I believe it's possible that it's already come to the point where part of his contract can be voided. Maybe that happens and he lands in a different situation somewhere else on a rebuilding squad to see what he has left. But I don't see him fitting into the future plans of the Magic, regardless of what some beat writers say. It's nice for, to be hopeful. And I do hope that he plays basketball again at some point in the future. But my thinking is that the Magic probably don't want him to play again because they can void the last year of his deal.
Let's say you're in a dynasty league, deep dynasty league. You can get him for a song. Are you doing it, or are you just going to stay away?
I'm going to stay away unless I am really in like the bottom of the bottom and I can pick him up off waivers. I don't think I'd even be trading for him right now, even in a deep dynasty league. I'm staying away from all Jonathan Isaac related news and not believing it until I see him on the court again.
I have to be with you every step of the way there. Now, the reason we still touch on him, like I said, it's kind of become a bit of a running joke. And people are still rostering him. He's still on 22% of Yahoo rosters. People are still holding out hope for whatever reason. We'll keep talking about him until he plays. Even if he plays, we'll probably still keep talking about it. But why don't we start getting to your questions? You guys can throw any questions you have in the chat regarding lineups, sit-start decisions, if it's a waiver you want to pick up, if it's a trade, if it's whatever. If you want to know our favorite color, throw it in there. We'll answer any questions you guys got. But we're going to start off with a question regarding Kyrie and the Brooklyn Nets. Thoughts on Kyrie's volume moving forward? Is he a long-term hold, or could you sell high as soon as he goes off for a triple-double in one of these games that's coming up, since he'll get that usage? I never know what to think of Kyrie Irving because, like a lot of people have talked about, there could be something in the news that hits him the wrong way, or there is some cause that he wants to take up and he leaves for a few weeks or something like that. There's always that kind of unknown with Kyrie Irving. At the beginning of the season, I traded Kyrie in my home league for Zion and for Jalen Suggs. It didn't really work out that well. I don't really know the right course of action with Kyrie because there's just so many variables going forward. I really think that he's one of the best players in basketball, in fantasy basketball, when he's healthy, but in health and availability, I'm not really sure what we can expect going forward because he's just such a wild card. What are your thoughts on Kyrie, though, Steve?
The one thing I think I missed on with Kyrie earlier in the season, and I think a lot of people did, Adrian, is I really think that he, like a lot of NBA players, is in a contract year. So it's in his best interest, if any of his seasons to be available, this is the season that is the most important for his dollar, for his bottom line. So I wouldn't be selling high. I mean, selling high, yeah, if you could get a first or second round talent in exchange for Kyrie, then sure. But outside of that, I'm not trading Kyrie with the news that Kevin Durant got hurt. I do agree with you, Joe, that it's still possible that something happens and we see Kyrie out of the lineup. I would not be shocked by any Kyrie story at this point. But I'm going to lean towards the fact that he's going to play his best ball as the season winds down, that he's going to be available for the majority of the season, barring, of course, a legitimate injury. I think he will play in the majority of ball games the rest of the season. So I wouldn't be selling high on Kyrie. I think that the contract year is impacting him. I think that this most recent incident that got him suspended by the league, and at one time we were unsure if Kyrie was ever going to play basketball again, or at least play basketball for the Nets. So I think he learned his lesson from that experience. A tough lesson to learn, but I believe that he did. And I think that this contract situation where he's going to be a free agent at the end of this year, I think that is definitely impacting him. And I think that he is a hold, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm so torn, and the reason I traded him in my home league is because I drafted him pretty much everywhere. And my go-to this year, and I feel again great advertising for the product that I put out there. I went with Kyrie and Kawhi Leonard at the 2-3 turn in a lot of my drafts. And at the beginning of the year, I was panicking about Kyrie. I traded him for Zion. Probably should I have done that? No. But that's just where my mind was at, and still kind of is always at with him, is that he's very headstrong. And there's nothing to do with his performance on the court. Like, he's averaging, what is he, 27, 5 and 5 or whatever it is, 90% from the line. Like, he's a borderline first round player. It's just a matter of if he's always going to prioritize basketball for me. And I think he will. I think you're right. I think between the contract situation, between him, having bad PR for so long, I think that probably did change something in him, and he has been, on the court for most of the season. There just could be something. There could be something where, he does sit out. So if you can trade him and get back a top 10 player for him, I would personally do it. If you're doing, a top 50, a top 40 player, then no, I would just hold on to Kyrie at that point. But if the price is right, I mean, I guess it works for every single player. If the price is right, you move on. But for Kyrie in particular, there's just always going to be something in the back of my head where I don't know how much we can trust him.
Here's an instance. Would you trade Kyrie Irving for DeJounte Murray?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would. I mean, the ceiling is probably higher with Kyrie, but I don't have that same worry with DeJounte. Would you do that?
Yeah, it would be a really tough decision for me. I'd really have to think about that, but I think that's the line that I would have in my head. If I was exploring a Kyrie Irving trade, I wouldn't go below that mark.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I think top 25-ish. I forget where Murray's ranked on the year, around 25, 30. I think that would be like the bottom dollar. Yeah, I wouldn't try and trade him for 2 or 3 pieces. Try and trade him for one stud if you're going to. It's just, I have such mixed feelings. So I still have a bunch of shares, and should I trade him? Should I hold on to him? I've had the same question myself. So it's something it's a very tricky, and it depends on how much you really trust him at the end of the day. And for me personally, you make good points about the contract and everything. I just don't trust him. I can't get behind him and say he's going to play 80 games. He's going to play.
And you know what? He has been the person who has caused us to distrust him, right? I mean, It's not one season. It's not one thing that happens off the court. It's repetitive nature of similar things occurring that keep him out of ball games for non-basketball issues. And that's why that's why a lot of people did panic trade. I don't think you weren't the only one that, traded Kyrie. And I mean, getting Zion back in return at the time, it could be seen as a win depending on how things went. If he stayed headstrong in his beliefs and he didn't come to the table and meet, basically society's demands of him after what he did, that was definitely a win if that situation happened. And that was something that was definitely possible at the time. It's much easier to look back with, all knowledge of what happened and say something was a win or a loss, but we don't know the outcome of situations when we are talking trades and things of that nature. So that Zion trade could have been a huge boon for you at the time, depending on what happened. It just happened to be that Kyrie did come back and he's playing now. So everything's easier to say after the fact, very difficult to say in the moment.
Yeah, of course. The hindsight is 2020. And I mean, if Zion didn't get hurt and he's not out, then maybe I'm not, he was balling when he was out there for a while. It was 30 points every single night. He was going crazy. Different skill sets, but I think, as a side note, Zion potentially could reach the same fantasy heights as Kyrie if he's healthy. He just very tricky situation. I also was, in the home league, you're trading with friends, and it's a whole different situation. Values all skewed in those kind of leagues. Should remind you guys here, as we're probably about halfway through. We'll see how long we go, depending on how many questions we get. But hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We got a ton of stuff here on the Sports Ethos YouTube in terms of basketball. And heading into the baseball season, I do plan on doing a ton of mock drafts, different videos. I'm probably going to start doing some live podcasts on the baseball side on YouTube as well. So hit the subscribe button. You'll never miss any of our stuff that we got going on here at Sports Ethos. Adrian, thank you for the kind words in the chat. Appreciate that. Matthew's asking, I think Kyle Lowry will pick it up with the Heat injuries. What are your expectations for Kyle Lowry? He's been kind of disappointing over the last month plus. What are your thoughts here, Steve?
I don't know if a Bam Adebayo injury is going to impact him all that much. I mean, I do think that he could see, some additional playmaking, some additional shot attempts. I don't think that we should expect the last month of Kyle Lowry. I think he'll bounce back to like his top 60 to 75, 80 range. I think that's what you can expect from him moving forward. Matthew, I don't really see him like taking a huge leap forward. So that's kind of where I envision him to be. I mean, did Tyler Hero get injured in the last game as well, or was it just Bam Adebayo? Right? It was
Hero's game time decision. He's questionable for Tuesday.
Okay, so I mean, if Tyler Hero's out, I still don't think it moves the needle all that much for Lowry. I think he's going to be, maybe he reaches like a top 50 mark for a short period of time, but I think you kind of know what to expect with Lowry at this point, and I don't think the injuries to, I think an injury to a guy like to Hero could positively impact Victor Oladipo more than it might Kyle Lowry with additional minutes. I think Lowry's already seeing the opportunity that he needs to deliver, and he's just been on a cold streak. I do think he'll bounce back.
I'd like to see that field goal percentage get up over 40, but I'm sure he will over time, probably end up where he usually does. No real concerns about Kyle Lowry. He's probably, as a side note, would you try and buy low on him based on his recent downstretch? Yeah.
Yeah. If I could trade like a, top 90, 100 guy who's been overperforming the last little bit, I would go for it. Yeah.
Sounds good. Next question we got here. Would you rather hold Larry Nance or Bol Bol? Personally, for me, it's going to be Bol Bol. But Steve, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, Bol Bol's got the upside, so I would rather hold Bol Bol than Nance. I do think Nance has a slightly safer floor than Bol, but Bol's got the tremendous upside that Nance just doesn't have.
Yeah, agreed. I was never a big Nance guy. I kind of had to eat my words when he started performing really well, but I think Bol's definitely got the higher ceiling, like you said. Adrian's asking, Drew for Zach LaVine, 10-team 9-cat. I'd have Zach. I think I would do it. I think I'd rather have Drew Holiday, most likely. What about you, Steve? What are you thinking?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think
it's pretty even, I think, but
yeah, I think you're basically switching up categories, right? Like if you wanted to lean more towards scoring, I guess you want to go LaVine, but Holiday has the defensive stats advantage on LaVine. I would say it depends on your team build. So I would look specifically at your team build. If we're talking about category leagues, so he's got Giannis on his team. So he's in a punt free throw build. LaVine and Holiday are both positive free throw shooters. LaVine is a better field goal percent guy. So maybe there's an argument to be made that LaVine fits that team build a little bit more because you want to make sure that you're winning in that field goal percentage. But it's close. I think it really depends on how you're doing in your other categories outside of that. So I think that is a really, really close one. I could go either way. It's right there.
Dan's having some fun here, saying he's old enough to remember when Steve got smoked on YouTube for calling Giannis a first-round bust. If you take him in the first round and you don't punt free throws, then he would be a first-round bust. If you take Giannis in the first round and then go about your draft normally and you take, your Drews and your Zach LaVines and your high free throw guys, then you're kind of misusing him a little bit, I think. Don't you think? Like he could potentially.
Let's see where Giannis is right now on a per game basis in 9-cat, just to illustrate how bad he is in free throws. If we go on Basketball Monster and we look up Giannis's per game ranking in 9-cat leagues, he ranks 128th. 127 players are ranked in front of Giannis right now to illustrate that point. Come at me with the smoke. I'm here for it. I'm willing to give takes that will get me in trouble. But I just look at the stats, and I mean, Giannis is the guy. His biography that came out, that book was incredible. The guy's journey into the NBA, his presence within the league is one of the best things the NBA has had in a really long time. It's been amazing for the country of Greece, even though they didn't really treat him that well. If you read the book, so I love everything about Giannis, but we're talking fantasy. The guy, his free throw percent on the season is 65% on 13.2 attempts per game. That is wild. You'll never win that category. So you're basically in a 9-cat league or in an 8-cat league, you're left with 8 or 7 categories. So you're hamstringing yourself with the first pick that you have, which you probably just don't want to do. Maybe in the second or the third round, maybe Giannis would have been a good value this year. But in that first round in an 8 or 9-cat league, I was staying away, and that's why.
I was trying to go to like one random team in one of my leagues that has Giannis, just seeing if they punt free throws when they draft him. And, it's not really it should be, but I think a lot of people go into drafts and they'll see Giannis there, and maybe, there's some more casual fantasy players or whatever, and Giannis, okay. And the next round, it's, whoever it is that doesn't fit that build. It's a Jason Tatum, or maybe not Tatum, that's a little bit too high, but, a Paul George or a Jimmy Butler or somebody like that. And it's like, I'm building a great team, like a great points league team. But in the category league, you're kind of just discrediting all the goodwill that you built up, or that you could have built up if you just, punted free throws and you went with Giannis and then Gobert, and then, down the line, you go Ben Simmons, whoever, I don't think everybody does that, even though they probably should. I don't think it's just done. And maybe it's just from my own leagues I see, public leagues, home leagues, whatever. It's not always done. And, you're right, Steve. Dan, eat Steve's words, because he was right. Steve was right there. He's not a first-round player unless you go a specific build. So we're going to defer to our director of content here. Let's go to our next question here. Dan, of course, all jokes, all kidding, all love. Who's better rest of the season between Gafford, Kessler, and Jabari Smith? Need to drop one of them. 9-cat, 12-team league. What are your thoughts here, Steve?
Rest of the season, Gafford, Kessler, Jabari. Oh, man. That is a tough question. I am going to say that in a starting role for the rest of the season, I would go with Kessler, but I just don't know if that's going to be in the cards. So because of that, I will lean towards you're going to need to drop one of them. So I would, instead of dropping one of them, I would rather look for a trade. I know that's a cop-out answer, but I wouldn't drop one of them. Maybe, Bella, if you want to come back with, maybe you have a couple other players on your roster. If you have time, I would definitely try and trade one of them. And, I would honestly try and shop all three and see what kind of return, because, you might have one person in your league who's really high on one versus the other two. And I would definitely trade them before I'm going to drop one of those guys, because I think you're just going to make a mistake by dropping one of them right now. So if I had to drop one, I mean, I guess I wouldn't want to. I don't want to drop any of them in a 9-cat 12 team. So I would try to explore a trade.
I agree. And I know it's, between baseball and basketball, people typically have hated when I've said, drop this guy or that guy and trade them. And the people typically don't like that answer. But sometimes, these guys are all well worth a roster spot in a 12-team league. You could even argue in a 10-team league for, I think you honestly could argue in a 10-team league, these guys, like, if you drop them, they will get picked up. So I agree with what you said there. If you can make a trade, then make the trade. If you had to drop one, it's hard to pick one. I really, truly wouldn't want to do it. Got another question here from Twitter that Dan has put here into the chat from user MJOS_25. He picked up Eason last week for the luxury stash. Grimes is also available. Is Eason worth dropping for Grimes in a 14-team league? I think they should probably both be on rosters, personally. I think with the way Grimes has been playing, you probably should go for Grimes. But I really like Eason. Like, he hasn't needed a lot of minutes this year to still put up pretty solid value. I would go Grimes, but I like both of them. What are you thinking, Steve?
Yeah, Grimes for an opportunity perspective, right? I mean, he's in Tibbs's starting lineup. He's going to see, upwards of at least 36 minutes a game, probably closer to that 40-minute mark as some weeks go. So I would go with Grimes from an opportunity standpoint. From an upside perspective, I think Eason is the guy. I think that if he gets loose towards silly season, I do think that he has the defensive upside to really help in category formats. But I think Grimes just has the safer floor because he's in that starting role. So from an opportunity perspective, I got to lean Grimes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question here. Would you try and sell Thomas Bryant with the AD news? I'd sell Thomas Bryant regardless of the AD news. Now, from what I understand, he's going to ramp up his process when the Lakers return to LA this week. Maybe a week away, 2 weeks away. I'm not really sure on the timeline exactly. But yes, if you can sell Thomas Bryant right now, like he's been incredible, I'd probably try and get back a top 75 player. If you're going to sell him, I wouldn't just sell him for nothing. But there's a pretty close expiration date on when he's going to lose value there. What are you thinking, Steve? Would you try and sell him? And if you were to try and sell him, what would you try and aim for?
I totally agree with you. I think regardless of the AD news, you want to try to sell Thomas Bryant. Everyone else got the AD news also, so that doesn't really help your cause in a way. You want like more, I guess, pessimistic AD news in order to really sell Thomas Bryant. Although, we still got news that he's like weeks. I think he's going to be multiple weeks away at least. To bring it full circle to another guy that has been, underperforming, Kyle Lowry, that we got a question about earlier. Thomas Bryant for Kyle Lowry, I would do that deal. You too, Joe?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would do that. It's the classic buy low, sell high.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different positions and everything else, different skills you're going to be getting. But in a vacuum, I'll take Kyle Lowry 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, and any of those three big men that we were just talking about that somebody needed to drop, I would take any of those three in front of Thomas Bryant in a sell high deal of Bryant. So I know that Michael Fiddle, one of our betting guys, is talking about how Gafford, I like what he said. His minutes fluctuate like the inflatable tube, man, outside a car dealership. That's good. That's good right there. I think it's possible that we see him go back to a pumpkin, but as long as he remains in the starting lineup, which he's been for a few weeks now, I think he's got a solid, safe role, maybe even safer than Walker Kessler. Although Kelly Olynyk getting injured really helps Kessler. So in that earlier question of the drop one of three, that Kelly Olynyk news makes it impossible to drop Walker Kessler, and his upside in that blocks and rebound department with great field goal percentage is just so nice. I wouldn't drop him. I wouldn't drop Jabari Smith, and I actually wouldn't drop Daniel Gafford, even though this comment is in my opinion, the best comment of our day right here. I like it.
Reminds me, I don't know how much Family Guy you've seen, but they do those cutaways of that wacky inflatable arm tube guy. I don't know. There's definitely somebody who's going to see this. You're going to know what I'm talking about. Family Guy used to always do those cutaways. I haven't seen much Family Guy recently, but
actually the best one is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. If you've seen the scene where Dee dances just like the inflatable.
I've seen the clip. Yeah, I've seen the
clip. It's brilliant. I love that clip. And then they sink the boat or something in that episode. I love that show.
I haven't seen all of Sunny in Philadelphia, but I've seen clips here and there. Yes, Dan's got it. The wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube, man. Thank you, Dan. You got it. That's what we're talking about here. Keep throwing your questions in, guys. We'll go for another 5-10 minutes, depending on how much volume we get in terms of questions. We got one right here from Matthew. Halliburton for Brooks and Gobert, which side do you prefer? Personally, I'm taking Halliburton all day. I'm not a Brooks fan. I know our Grizzlies guys are not going to like hearing that if they're listening in. But he just is not very good. I mean, I guess specify if you're talking category or points league. I guess in points league, you'd be a little closer, but I don't think Brooks is even really rosterable in category leagues, like very deep leagues for me. So I'm definitely taking the Halliburton side.
Yeah, smash that Halliburton side. Brooks, I think Brooks's worst ability is not knowing his role and his ability and being overly confident. He's a good basketball player, but he just thinks he's the best basketball player in the world on most nights that he plays, and he's just not. And I never like taking the 2-for-1s, the 2 side. Never.
Typically,
If I'm in a rebuilding dynasty league, sure, then maybe I'll take the side that has more assets. But in redraft, I really want the best player in the deal.
I just with Brooks, like I tend to have biases towards Canadian players. I am from Toronto. If there's a Canadian player, I tend to root for them a little bit more. With Brooks, if I'm telling you I don't like Dylan Brooks, you should take that to heart, because I'll look for any reason to root for these Canadian Toronto guys. But Brooks is he's a chucker, he's a chucker. He takes a million shots. He's like RJ Barrett, he's very similar to RJ Barrett for me in terms of fantasy. Really borderline in a category league, fine in a points league, and honestly, probably not even really worth it in a category league at all. So let us know, I guess, if that's points league, category league, but it doesn't really change the answer for me too much here. Thoughts on Najee Marshall with Zion out and Nance game time decision? I think he's probably worth a stream. What do you think, Steve?
I think he's got a really safe floor because he's got the opportunity. I was looking at his game log here, and I mean, he's been really picking it up lately. Got 38 minutes in their last game on Saturday and put up 24 points, had 3 steals. He's actually had 3 steals in both of his last 2 games. So while I would not expect the kind of production you've seen from him the last 2 games, I think he's a low-end streaming option in a 12-team league if you're looking to stream tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him put up like a much lower production line, like something of like a top, 120, 130. But I think he's got that safe floor. I think he really does have that safe floor. I think he's going to get the opportunity. I think even if Nance plays, I think you're okay getting something out of Marshall with both Ingram and Zion out.
Yeah, Ingram is still out. Zion's out. Nance is listed as probable, but I still think that, like you said, it's probably going to be worth it, even if he's not giving you 25 and 13 or whatever he did these last couple of games. Still likely going to be worth a stream. We're going to wrap it up here in a second. If you guys have any last second thoughts or questions, throw them into the chat. Steve, anything you want to throw out there before we sign off for today?
So I give out some dark horse streams on Twitter during the week. And I gave out some streams for today, and I'll let you guys know about them before I post them on Twitter here. Couple guys I was looking at these guys are all on less than 9% of Yahoo rosters. First is Xavier Tillman. This one would only be in effect if Steven Adams, who when we started the show was questionable. If he's out, Tillman could be an option if you want to get some, defensive production with rebounds and modest scoring. You got another guy I like who actually, since I looked at these dark horse streams, his status has actually improved from a streaming perspective. That's Romeo Langford, because Josh Richardson's been downgraded to questionable for tonight. We got Devin Vassell, who's been out. Now he'll be out probably until after the All-Star break. So Romeo Langford's been given the starting role. I like him tonight. He's only, I think, on 3% of rosters, especially if Josh Richardson sits out. Even if Richardson plays, Langford's going to get opportunity. He hasn't gotten the defensive production yet, but I think it will come. So I like Romeo Langford. A little bonus one tonight. One of my guys that I absolutely love his journey. That's Juan Toscano Anderson. He's gotten quite a bit of defensive production the last couple games. You got Troy Brown Jr.'s out, LeBron's out, everybody's out. JTA, he might actually get upwards of 24 minutes tonight. Could put up that defensive production. He's a pretty decent assist guy. If only he could shoot the 3-pointer, he'd probably be more of a rotation player for the Lakers, but he just can't shoot. But JTA 1% rostered, or maybe it was 0%. But those are a few dark horse streams I have. And then the last thing I have today, anybody that's watching, next Monday, so next week, week 14, I want to put this on everybody's radar, is Martin Luther King Day. The NBA starts at 10 a.m. With games next Monday. So enjoy the holiday with your NBA games, but be sure to set your lineups on Sunday night in those weekly lineup settings at the end of this week, because Monday will come faster than any week we've seen with the early start time. So I believe myself and Joe will be here much earlier next week. Just wanted to put that on everyone's radar in weekly lineup settings or even daily lineup settings to not miss that Monday early start time.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it yet. The first game is at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so we'll probably get going maybe an hour before then, roughly, something like that. We'll figure it out behind the scenes. We'll let you guys know over on Twitter. We actually got one more question here we'll get to, and then we'll wrap it up. Trying to get JJJ in a trade, but the price tag is high at the moment. Yeah, it's going to be as high as it's probably ever going to be at this point. How would you go to get him top 30? Yeah, if it's a top 30 player, like, at 30 for Jaren Jackson, I would probably do it, but I don't think that's even going to cut it at this point for him. He's been like a first-round player. He's just been insane. I don't think there's really much of a room to buy without paying too much for him at this point. What do you think, Steve, before we let the people go?
Yeah, I don't think that you are going to be able to get him. I mean, if anybody is, who has him rostered, the only negative part about his game is his foul trouble. So I think the window is gone, unfortunately. I just a slight little brag here, or actually maybe a big brag, but right when like a few weeks before Jaren Jackson Jr. came back, I decided to trade off Jonas Valanciunas and PJ Washington for Jaren Jackson Jr. I had to sit on him for about 2 weeks' time, but just a lesson to be learned that you got to trade for these guys before they come back, or maybe right when they come back. But if someone's holding on to them for that long, you're not going to get them now. So unfortunately, I would go top 30, but you're not going to get them for top 30. So you're going to have to just I would try to package, maybe package two of your young guys that you mentioned earlier for somebody in that that top 40, top 50 range. If you could, somebody who's near the top of the standings, maybe they would be interested in taking a couple upside swings for somebody who has a little bit of a safer floor, but can for sure deliver like top 50 value rest of the way. That might be a good way to approach it.
Yeah, I agree. One last one, and this is actually going to be the last one here because I got to go have dinner. Steve's got stuff to do as well. Halliburton, Plumlee, and Beal for Tatum and CJ. I think I take Tatum side. I agree. I would take the Jason Tatum side there as well. What are your thoughts, though, Steve?
Yeah, I would take the Tatum and CJ side. For me, it's basically Tatum and CJ for Halliburton and Beal, and I'd rather have Tatum than Halliburton, and I'd rather have CJ than Bradley Beal. So yeah, that's where I'd go.
That one's cut and dry for me as well. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Dinner, what's Dan saying now? Dinner at 6 p.m. You got young kids, but I get hungry, Dan. What are you talking about? I'm just sitting around here doing podcasts and stuff, doing schoolwork, building up an appetite throughout the day. We're gonna eat maybe 6:30. But you know what? I'm pretty damn hungry. That's the point of it. I need to go get something to eat. But thank you guys so much for hanging out here with us. Hit the like and subscribe buttons before you head out the door so you never miss any of our content. Going to be ramping up the baseball content on YouTube as well, like I talked about. Basketball, we have this show. We got the waiver wire show on Sundays. There's tons of stuff. Dan does some live shows here and there as well. Our YouTube is the place to be. And if you're not following us on Twitter, go follow Steve. He does these nightly streamers every single day at Steven Vidovich. Steven with a PH, of course. I'd like to say that because a lot of people just spell Steven with a V, I think. But in case people are kind of zoning out, Steven with a PH, Vidovich. You can find me at Joe Orrico 99. Guys, thank you so much for spending time with us. We will see you again next week. Cheers.